the machinery of education in the state of Vermont is, as you mentioned, very slow to change. And part of it may be blamed on local school boards, but I think a big chunk of it is based on the teacher union. And you mentioned training our workforce. Chittenden County tried to get a wonderful technical education high school, and it was defeated, in my opinion, by a lot of local educators who said, oh, it's too much change, we don't understand it. And you see that over and over again. The same thing with school choice. The union is so much against school choice. And my opinion is, unless we can come up with a way to change the control that the teachers union have on our local school boards as well as our state board, I'd like to hear from you folks what ideas you have, but I think that is the #1 problem with education is that the union fights change as much as they possibly can.
Couldn't agree more. I am 100% supporter of Rob's comments on school choice. I regard school choice as a twofer. It's a twofer because it puts in the hands of people who are most concerned about the welfare of their kids, i.e. parents, now what the best opportunities out there are for the kids. But having tried for 5-6 years to try to effect change from within the system and been thwarted as a school board member and as a general pain in the neck, to me, the prospective competition that would enter and become part of the education process system could affect change and force change from without the system. Because public schools, from a cost perspective and an outcomes perspective, would have to start competing for that dollar. So I see school choice as a twofer, as addressing both those critical, best for the kids, but also ultimately, although there'll be a difficult transition period, I think, because we're a small market, ultimately, from an outcomes perspective, beneficial for the kids as well, from a cost perspective.
But the unions are scaring parents, and parents speak to legislators and say, oh, don't mess around with my school district, I'd like to do it.
That's where school choice comes in. That'll take care of it. I mean, I'll let Rob wax eloquently on school choice. I'd never try to outdo him there, but once again, it's changing from without. It's changing the rules from outside this current system and forcing the current system to respond to that change.
How do you make that happen?
Well, it has to be grassroots organizing, and it's been very frustrating for 10 years pushing for school choice because parents don't seem to be involved. We were very lucky in one respect that the school consolidation issue this year really awakened the school choice community that exists in Vermont. For a long time, when everything was hunky-dory in their little neck of the woods, I got mine and I'm comfortable with it. There's no reason for me to rock the boat. Now that they see that the threat exists, there are a lot of people out there at Vermont, or School Choice Vermont. It's got 800 fans on Facebook now. They are organizing all the independent schools to stand up and not fight for just keeping the choice they have, but expanding it to everybody else. That's exactly what you need. Because you're right, the teachers' unions are very powerful. We've seen the number of students decline by 10,000 and the number of teachers increase by 22% over the past 10 years. That's power. That's raw political power. And believe me, they put that raw political power to work in these elections to maintain the status quo. But we know from challenges for change and that whole debate that happened this year, the status quo is unsustainable and it's unacceptable. We need to do something different. And school choice is it. I mean, the accountability is directly to the parents. Bob was talking about let's have accountability to the superintendent through merit. I don't know, merit pay is probably not the right word. It's not there. But if you're responsible to the parent, what happens is going to be best for the kid. And as you said, there are ways that we can tie this in that make it much more affordable for the taxpayer as well. It's not just a win-win, I think it's a win-win-win.
I get concerned when I hear external blame, and I'm not quite so quick to go and say this is all about the unions. I think it's also around a lack of leadership. I think that there are things we can do within schools. I think we can work better with the community and Vermont in general to define what we want schools to do. I said that before. If we're clear that we want universal choice, let's make it happen. let's design a structure that reflects that. We have that within our grasp, but we need to focus on it. If we can identify our values like that, we can build a structure that reflects them and lets us follow through. So I think that there's a lot we can do in terms of internal accountability that will drive us in that direction. I don't think it needs all to be external.
Very good point. I'll just throw in a piece that has been missing has been political leadership. So hopefully some of that will emerge.
It was mentioned by one of the panelists in passing that schools are asked to do things that may not be helpful to promoting good education. Could you be more expansive on that subject in terms of what some of these activities are and what the consequences might be for streamlining those activities from a financial point of view and from an effectiveness point of view?
It's hard because I never want to say that some of the human service slack that we need to pick up in tough times doesn't help kids, isn't in their best interest. And as a humanitarian, you want to be able to provide those services. That said, one of the hardest jobs I find when we go into schools is to start to say, here's what we're required to provide, here's what we'd like to provide. And if you go into most schools in Vermont, you'll find that we provide a lot more than we're required to provide. That's problematic, because what we're doing certainly comes from a culture of caring. It comes from a place that I think we're all comfortable being because we do sincerely care about our children and about their future. But I'd argue that not everything that we're doing is necessary within the context of school. If it's important, we as a society need to figure out a way to provide those services. And when it's heaped onto schools, I think you get an unrealistic picture of how much it really costs to educate a child. I think if we define educated more narrowly, that we could probably create a much more streamlined and efficient system. I'd like to have that opportunity.
Some of the decline in enrollments is because people choose to homeschool their kids. And I think that there's not enough resources for homeschooling, and the state doesn't seem to push that idea. If you live out in a rural place, is it cost effective to put kids in a school bus and bus them a long ways to school when you could put those resources online and teach them through the internet? And I know not a lot of schools in Massachusetts use the internet for as a teaching resource instead of just having to sit in the classroom. I'm seeing kids come out of homeschooling that go into major colleges that are just as competitive as kids that come out of public education. And I think maybe it's a failing of public education in general because we're not.
Is there a question? Just want people to
Well, can I turn Roger's statement into a question, actually? And that is about, how should the public embrace homeschooling? And the challenge and challenges for change that came up is how can we restructure government to do more, have better outcomes with less financial resources? And I think you're exactly right. We need to look at homeschooling. And this is the difference between public schools and public education. Public education, the way I see it from a school choice perspective, is are we using public resources to educate a child to our best ability as a society to maximize the potential of that kid? And so if we took public resources and put it into homeschooling, which is arguably a way to meet challenges for change, get as good or better outcomes in many cases for significantly less resources, we need to restructure our government in such a way as to take advantage of that opportunity. I think if we did that, we'd be in great shape. And again, I think that there's an economic development aspect of that too, because there's a great homeschooling culture out there in the other 49 states that if we were able to make Vermont a haven for homeschoolers, we would get educationally oriented, entrepreneurial people coming to Vermont so they can take advantage of resources that only we provide.
And it's totally consistent